So when we step back from it all, we've got crazy gas prices, war on multiple fronts, and basically it feels like we've been talking about inflation for 10 years now, and it's not getting better. Obviously, consumer confidence hit the worst low in May, really significant drops. Bounced back a little bit in June, which is par for the course on the roller coaster that we've all been on. Can you talk a little bit about how your customers are feeling and how do you measure that in today's times? Because clearly getting a read on anything is so hard these days. And we'll start with Mel.
Sure. Yeah, and we have such different industries
Right,
and different
right.
products. So the good news for Mercedes-Benz is that the EU Parliament agreed to the Turnberry discussion and what was agreed there. So that's going to bring some relief for sure on the tariff front to Mercedes. But if you look at what our customers are saying, our consumers that are considering the brand, they need a sense of reassurance that they've made the right purchase. So that has shifted a lot over the last few years, whereas it might have been a reassurance that the brand felt good. Now it's the brand makes me feel smart. That retroactive justification that buying a very expensive car actually was the right decision. We're starting to see that shift.
Are they still
with all
nervous?
Of this.
Are they like...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the research period is getting a little bit longer. If you look at the digital data, the discussion with our dealers at the point of purchase is getting a little longer. That discussion's just taking a bit longer to convince them.
Okay. And obviously mid-market...
Yeah.
Definitely not selling to Mercedes crowd, although I'm sure they're
It's
wearing
possible
it.
there's some crossover.
Up and
So,
down.
Hope so.
You'll go for every dollar you can. How do you measure it?
Yeah, it's funny, guys. I've been doing this retail game for quite a long time, and this has been one of the trickier years. So goes American Eagle, so goes the American Mall. As Suzanne, you just pointed out, we are as mid-market gets. And what I have found so fascinating about this year is you just never know the twist and turn around every corner. There's a week that is softer than your plan, and you're thinking, what's going on? And then all of a sudden things turn on again and you're high-fiving each other. So I think that we are helped because we have a younger consumer base. Mom and dad are still probably using their credit card to take care of their kids, so that probably does help. But I will say when the Middle East war began, we definitely felt some pressure in the retail industry. I think people have now understood what that means to their own bank account because the third-party data we're seeing is indicating a pretty strong start to the summer for our industry. So it's a roller coaster ride. And that makes the job of a marketer that much more fascinating and that much more interesting because you actually don't know what's going to happen day to day, hour to hour.
As you're trying to figure out what sentiment is, right, it feels like there's more data than ever. Is there any research that's new and different? Are you going into homes? Are you using AI to figure out? Because clearly, like every Tom, Dick, and Harry now tells you, I have some kind of tool that's going to tell you what I think. But I feel like we kind of lose the touch, right? Like Procter & Gamble built, 16 to $20 billion brands because they spent time in people's homes. Is there something you're doing to kind of get a better read on what's out there? And is the tools enough?
Well, it's funny because I'm going to answer your question, Suzanne, but I saw a recent piece of research that we did that reinforced my personal belief that a teenager is a teenager is a teenager because for all the things we talk about, social media and phones and everything, there are three things that are still the most influential for a teenager purchase: friends, mom, and physical stores. And those have been the same things since the 1960s, right?
I love physical stores.
I know, right? Well, and the mall rats are back. I mean, store traffic is very much accelerating. And if you're in this kind of Gen Z, Gen Alpha space, you probably are over-indexing in the industry. But to answer your question, yeah, there's almost too much information. There's analysis paralysis if you get overwhelmed. What we're finding is if you're offering the same old product with the same old marketing at the same old price, it is going to be tougher.
Yeah.
But if you're offering innovation or trend forward or exciting marketing campaigns that are getting the world talking, people are going to show up. So I know that's marketing 101, but I feel like this year that trend towards offering something new and different and unique in the marketplace is a must-have to win.
Okay. So in our case, if you're familiar with the automotive industry, which I know you are, Suzanne, because you've covered this for a couple of decades now, we're in a 3-tier system, right?
Yeah.
So our tier 1, if you'll call it, is our sort of Mercedes-Benz spend or marketing investment. We have the third tier, which is our dealers, and then we have the second where we might share some money to invest, right? And it's talking to our dealers that gives us some of the most interesting information.
Yeah.
So you, just like you said, analysis paralysis, there's many reports, there's many people generating data. We
Yeah.
can look at many KPIs in our digital space, our upper funnel space, whatever it is, but talking to our dealers gives us a totally different sense. They're on the ground, they're receiving the customers coming in, talk about that physical store experience. They're negotiating with them. They're sitting there, for the 2-hour process of F&I, the financing portion that everybody hates as part of buying the car. That gives us a wealth of information to go on.
That made me scared because now I know there's some dealer telling you that me and my husband were fighting over the fact that I just only cared about the color of the car that we bought, and he was screaming about financing. Anyway, it's funny, like both of you mentioned like face to face, right? Like we're going to spend this whole week talking about AI, right? And like machines, and machines going to do everything, and yet both of you here, and the first thing we're talking about is like real connections to humans, actually listening and getting it from their mouths almost, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and I think there's been a mental health epidemic, right, with younger people, and they are seeking and searching connections with each other, and I think that's why you're seeing this return to real. Honestly, I actually think AI has been very good for one thing. AI is a great villain in a marketing story these days. And I think that our brands, both American Eagle and Aerie, have been quite aggressive in actually making AI a villain. And I think that we've seen very strong engagement with any content that pits humankind versus machines. And I think that we're going to probably continue to explore what that means in the coming months.
Well, since he brought up AI.
I know, I was like, I have a whole AI section, but we're right there.
It's only 10
It's only
o'clock.
10 o'clock.
I think we take a very different approach, right? I mean, sure, we can fear it, and I see teams that fear AI because they believe it's going to, because there is a tendency to talk about AI through the lens of efficiency and productivity, right? It seems to always be the default way to think about it, and what we've been trying to do at Mercedes-Benz is pivot that into how can AI become a growth engine?
Yeah.
What is it you can do with it that you could not do before for the business,
Yeah.
right? And just that simple changes the mentality, and I feel like the mindset and the culture piece of it is really undersung. We love talking about it as a tool, but we don't talk about how we need to foster a different way of thinking with it. Instead of fear, optimism about what it can do.
Yeah, but I think if you're on the other side of it, most people then will say, yeah, of course, but you're going to need less people to do it. So people default, and it's a fear. It's because it's the unknown still. We'll go back and come back to AI in a minute, but I wanted to ask you, just because and that's why we paired you together to see, like, we've got the market at the high, mid-level, and, you're like every market, you want every customer. When you look at the sentiment out there, have you noticed differences in generations? Like, is Gen Z and boomers thinking differently about the economy, and what are they feeling? Like, is one more optimistic than the other, or are they all in this shaky place? And obviously I have kids, so I know they just use my credit card and don't really care about the economy, but do you notice a difference?
I think overall the sentiment is shakiness,
Okay.
for sure. There is a sense of uncertainty and putting off big purchases that we see, and the luxury market feels that first, right? But I do think there are certain differences. There's a definite sense of pessimism with Gen Z that you don't see as greatly with the boomers or the Gen Xers. Understandable. They've built a little wealth, right?
Yeah.
Gen Z doesn't know where it's going.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting because the stock market's just not been on a tear. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to you to say that when I think baby boomers, and I'm not one yet, thank God, but I would assume that they were feeling probably more safer, but yet we're seeing the Lux market having issues.
Yeah, in Q1 in my industry, it was very clear. Young people were out and having a great time, probably using Suzanne's credit card. But they were the ones that were revving my entire industry. Having said that, Suzanne, you definitely saw a market shift of women 25 to 45 out of the market, sitting on the sidelines and kind of getting a better handle of what was happening. They're back in it now. And again, I feel, I don't want to make this political, so please don't take it this way, but I think that people have learned in the current administration that it's going to be a winding roller coaster path, and somehow, some way, people still want to live their life. They want to live their best life. They want self-expression. they want to travel, they want to see people. And I think that people say, okay, well, this is now the gas price at the pump, and now I'm going to try to maneuver my own personal finances in a way that I can still afford that pair of jeans or that dress or whatever it is.
When you look at your business,
Yeah.
are you seeing your customers sort of trade down to fast fashion cheaper, or are you actually capturing some of the luxe trading down to you? Like,
I think both is happening, and I'm not saying we're always on the winning side, but I think both is actually
Okay.
happening. I think what the younger audience want is this have to have it now, and there's this expression of I want to be different but the same, and I feel like that's where fast fashion could be winning, especially on tops. When you talk about jeans, our must win, there's still fit technology, there's still fabrication, and I think that's why we continue to be dominant in that particular category. But the interesting thing is, to your point, Suzanne, the higher market actually has shifted down into where we are, and we've actually gained market share in demos and in geographies that tend to have higher household income. So I feel like both are happening at the same time.
yeah. And when you work at a place like a Mercedes and you think about, what we see now is every marketer, especially retail, is rushing to discount. How do you proposition without coming off as a sort of low-class brand and a price point in your marketing? Like, can you get away? Like, you have to show this is a good purchase, but you're not like, buy one, get one free this week at Mercedes. So how do you approach that?
You could.
You could.
Hopefully, we don't reach that point.
Are you going to say everybody gets a car?
No.
Okay. Sorry. I tried.
We have to balance both sides of driving performance and meeting our sales targets while still building the brand. And I often talk about this through the lens of our being 140 years old this year. We were founded, not founded, but the patent for the motor wagon, the world's first automobile, was filed in 1886, and that was by Carl Benz. So we've been around for 140 years, but you don't stick around for 140 years or for the next 140 if you're not also bolstering the brand and constantly putting that equity back into it. So our spend, our investments are very much balanced between both. There's a non-negotiable that both have to happen, but we also have to sell over 300,000 cars in the United States this year. Right? And so our performance marketing has to do its work as well. So both are always in play, and there's a tension every day that we're trying to balance.
But do you use that discount or some kind of incentive?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that ratchets up.
that's the way the market works, and the car business probably hasn't changed in many, many decades. And if you're Mercedes-Benz and operating at a premium versus BMW and Lexus, who are our main competitors, there has to be a certain amount of discounting that happens so that someone is being brought in, at least from a traffic standpoint, and having that negotiation and conversation.
And for somebody in the retail space, which obviously sometimes it's a race to the bottom, right? It becomes a promotional bonanza. How do you fight back against that, right? Like when you're faced with, hey, we need to get the earnings up, and you don't want to erode your brand equity out there, how do you continue to say, oh, no, we're not just going to cut prices?
I think the focus is on value. Listen, we're a promotional brand.
Yeah.
Most retailers in the mid-market are, but the focus is on value. And when we look at data, we are perceived to be the most aspirational price point in these categories in the mid-market. So that's telling product stories, that's telling brand stories, that's making sure we talk about quality stories. And that's where we're winning. We are the value perception, especially when times are tough. You know that this product is going to last. You're going to get value out of it.
Yeah. I'm going to stay with you for a second because I think I read that you guys, for the back half of the year, are pulling away a little bit from awareness ad campaigns and more on the performance on your mixing. Is that something you're doing, or?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that we are hyper aware that we need to drive this thing.
Yeah.
That we're there. That people are not just coming to us. We actually need to pull them in. But when I look at the budget, the reality is that we're still over-investing in brand, but we have to bring them home from a performance perspective. I think that what we were talking about, Suzanne, in that earnings call is one of the most fascinating and emerging trends in retail is affiliate communities that are actually brand owned. And we just launched a fairly big creator community in recent months. Think of them as digital salespeople. We have 35,000 store associates in our 900 stores. These are digital sales associates. And so I feel like because they are real people, they're building some brand, but they are actually are pulling you through the funnel and getting conversion as well.
Sounds great. Have you switched your media mix a little bit, given the environment?
We have to because of a phenomenon that happened during COVID, which is that our leasing portfolio shrank.
Yes.
We got to get those, as people got out of their cars and bought them because of the supply challenges, we now need to increase our leasing portfolio again by conquesting, as we call it. So we need to start taking, not just from BMW and Lexus, but speaking of brands as upgraders, from the Genesis, the Cadillacs, the Volvos. So we're working to prospect in those communities as well. So our mix has changed a bit as a result of needing to pull from the market as well. But again, we're a luxury brand, and that positioning piece is really important.
Yeah, because you can't slip it.
We
right?
can't,
Yeah, 'cause
yeah.
it's long term. There was a shift towards lower performance marketing for you guys, but you said 40% of your media budget is now AI planned. Is that correct?
It is, and this is because the platforms that we work with, the Metas, the Googles, and others, are doing such an effective job of providing tools to marketers and advertisers that allow us to essentially say, go find these kinds of people.
Yeah.
Go. And the efficiency has been remarkable. And because those efficiencies are there, it's a much easier conversation to have with a CFO in terms of let's continue to invest when you see opportunity in the marketplace.
And obviously Facebook and Meta have made a big push into like, just give us your budget and we'll take care of the rest. Lots of marketers are sort of a little skeptical of that, or at least nervous because it's such a black box. They were a black box, now it's getting even darker in that box. How do you sort of challenge that, or is it like making sure you're not giving over the keys too much? How do you negotiate that?
I don't know about you guys, Melly, but for us, it's been incrementality of, hey, let's get to this certain point, feel comfortable, understand what we're both getting, and then push ourselves even more. Believe me, and any advertiser in the room knows that they would like to take 100% ownership of the budget. That ain't gonna happen. But I cannot deny, as someone who was initially a little bit skeptical 3-4 years ago of where this was headed, that we are seeing really strong results and are excited to explore this frontier even more.
Melanie, I want to switch gears with you for a second because obviously the car makers took it in the teeth when the tariffs hit last year. And it was, if you think about it, it was such a disruptor. I would just love to talk a little bit about how you marketed your way through that. Like what actually worked to get, because clearly I remember we were in the market for a car. How did you tackle that challenge? Like when so many people were like, oh my God, I got to put off buying a car now. I know they're coming. Or did you simply try and get ahead of it and get people to buy early? What was the thinking? How did you handle that?
So it was in, I believe, last year, right? 2025, in the first quarter of the year when this all started to come down. Of course, we were in war rooms doing a lot of scenario planning around it. But I think what we recognized as marketers or the marketing team was that in the face of all this economic instability, customers of Mercedes-Benz or prospects of Mercedes-Benz needed something to trust. So our decision, actually driven by the marketing team, was to retain all model year 25 pricing as is. And it was a huge hit. I can't tell you exactly how much it was, but it was in the hundreds of millions.
You can tell us. Nobody will.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
There we go.
So we took a massive write-down in order to keep our market share. So we made that strategic trade-off decision to give our customers trust, lose a little bit of money, but keep our foothold in share. So
that was took it on Wall Street.
It was a big decision.
Long term, it would play back in brand equity for you.
Right. And typically in a car maker, as you probably know, that's not a decision marketers make.
Well, how did you end up making that decision?
Because I said, if I were a customer, which is our job to be the voice of the customer, I would want some kind of stability and ability to trust Mercedes-Benz. No other OEM was out there talking about maintaining model year 25 pricing. Then we were able to get out with all of our creative and call it the Mercedes-Benz promise, right? So it started with this idea of trust and then really took place even in our creative.
It's interesting because so many times when you think about the C-suite and what role a marketer can play, how did you get to this point where they would trust your decision? What was the toughest challenge to getting that buy-in from them?
I would say I spent my entire first year, it's been 3 years now at Mercedes-Benz. I'd say I spent the whole first year just marketing. All I did that first year was
It's a
was,
great
was
line.
remind everybody that we're not just there to sell cars, but that we are a true art and science and discipline, right? And that you can't just stick anybody into it. You do have to have some experience. You do have to understand the role of it and the importance of marketing within your overall business, right? That it drives growth, that we're not there to throw parties and arrange flowers, right? So that was my first year, and building that credibility helped later.
Well, you certainly did, because that was a big move, and I didn't even know marketing was involved. I'm going to switch gears about creative for a minute, right? Because we talk about the clinical side and the dollars, but clearly we've talked about all these tension points in the market. Can you both talk a little bit about how, I have a specific question about how you shifted, but the tone of your advertising in the past 2 years, given like what we're all dealing with. I mean, some days I just don't want to get out of bed, right? We're all in the same boat. How do you market in this environment, and what's resonating with people?
I think I'm going to answer two ways. One is, in my industry, there's a term called open to buy, which is our merchant partners keeping a certain amount of open to buy to follow fashion and trend. We've kind of adopted that mentality in marketing as well, because this world is moving so quickly now that we can't say 6 to 9 months ahead of time when we're coming up with these seasonal campaigns that we're walking into a scenario that we did not anticipate or plan for. So our team is keeping more open to buy. I think also it has been a year where things like humor, color, and human connection are probably revving even harder because people want a little bit of lightness. We had a campaign last year. You might have covered it.
I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about it.
So we had a part 2 that launched to start the summer season, and it was very purposeful to feel lighter, brighter, and of course it's summer, so that's the season to do that. But that was really because the mind space of our customer base wanted to be in a little bit of a lighter and brighter space. So I think we're going to continue to play that game in the coming months. And see where the world is as we get into what I call the Super Bowl of denim, which is our back to school season.
I know. I feel like I already saw ads. I'm like, really? Are we already there yet? We haven't get July 4th.
I agree with Craig, though. I mean, relatability is huge right now, right? And your ability to make sure that the customer or prospect is relating to the brand, even a luxury brand, is really important. That means showing real life stories. The story of a woman surprising her sister on her birthday, right? The puppies, the kids that are coming back into the creative while still preserving some of the luxury mystique.
Yeah.
That's the trick, right?
Kids and puppies are back in advertising.
Kids and puppies.
Whoa.
And humor, like you said, right?
But because also if you turn on, like if you look at the body of work that's out there, right? I would always write the story every recession, like the nostalgia thing, right? Like it's everywhere. I do think something else is driving that. I think it's actually TikTok and how kids are discovering old things quicker and they're using that as their own culture. But is that just something you're leaning on because it makes people kind of feel good in the moment?
1,000%. Roku shared with us the most watched shows on streaming, and I was blown away that almost all of the shows are from the early 2000s. Yeah. And of course, there's a Y2K trend happening in my industry right now, but it really is, to your point, nostalgia. Pre-social media, pre-cell phone, all those things. So I definitely think that there is a nostalgia play. And again, not being political when I say this, and I can't even believe I have to even give that context, but USA 250 and Americana, very much happening in my industry as well. The World Cup probably also has something to do with it, but anything red, white, and blue is flying off the shelves.
On both sides. Around the country, because that's
around the
interesting.
country.
I think last year we had Gap here too.
Yeah.
And I was asking the CEO about the same thing because they go lean into the red, white, and blue, especially around July 4th, and it's a big driver of their business.
I think it's the double whammy of the World Cup, which all of us are really now getting into, and with the USA team performing well, I think that will only continue to increase in the next couple of weeks, and then the celebration of USA 250 as well. So you're seeing that resonated across the country. You're not seeing it just in pockets. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
A little different for a German brand.
Different. Yeah. Speaking of German brands, think about this. One of the things that has happened is obviously there's a rise in nationalism in Europe, in every country, in our country, and you see American brands, whether it's to make sure they're playing to the administration or to the middle of the country or whatever it is, without being political, fine.
Yep.
But we're definitely leaning on American. How is your company handling that as a German company? Because you see lots of foreign brands now that are, they don't say made in the USA, but they're like factories built in the USA. How do you sort of navigate that?
Yeah,
as nationalism is at an all-time high around the world.
I mean, it's a good point, Suzanne. I mean, first of all, we do not comment on political matters. Nobody cares what Mercedes-Benz thinks about the political environment. But I do stick to the facts, and the facts are that we're in over 20 states, some kind of presence, 13 legal entities, 2 plants building vans, cars. Many people do not know that we're actually a net exporter outside of the United States. We export more SUVs out of our Tuscaloosa plant than we actually keep in the market here. 40% stay here when we're in France, but you know what I mean. 40% stay in the United States, 60% go outside our borders. It's really significant, right? We have over 10,000 employees. We invested about $11 billion since we started here in the United States. We have another 7 or so coming billion by the end of the decade. I mean, you just state the facts. Like, we are invested, we produce, we employ. That's how we manage it.
Yeah, and that seems to be what every brand that's global and not based in the U.S. is doing, obviously. I wanted to go back just one step about, you were talking about how you have now that seat at the table. But when you talk about the environment we're in, there's always the guy in the C-suite, and he has the title of a CFO. They still remain super cautious. And in all of my years covering this, right, marketing has always been the first sacrificial lamb. Can you talk a little bit when that conversation happens? How do you convince them to not make marketing the sacrificial lamb in these times?
I'm really inspired with what Melody said, because I think in my long career, it's shifted from we're doing brand campaigns and winning lions to customer and growth.
Yeah.
And very honestly, like, marketing cuts have not been in any conversation
Really?
in our year. And I think it's because we have hopefully proved the value of driving the customer and driving growth. And I think that's a market shift that I've experienced in the last 10, 15 years. And I think that we see that this is a very competitive market, and others are spending aggressively, and we have to play that game as well.
And I've had 3 CFOs from Germany.
In 3 years?
That's the one job that Germans are not going to let an American fill.
And we thought CMOs had it tough.
No, I know. So I've had 3 CFOs in the last 3 years that I've been at the brand. And so it's been a different conversation with all of them. And I will say the one that I have right now is the best one I've had, because his name is Sasha. The 2 of us can sit down together, and he can say, here are my financial targets. And I can say, well, this is what I'm trying to accomplish for growth, not to have fun, And I'm not here to just have fun.
No flowers.
Right, exactly. But here's what I need to accomplish for growth. And then the 2 of us try to figure out how to marry those goals. That is the best relationship that a CMO and a CFO can have, but it's not always like that, right? So I feel very fortunate in that. But that's how we do, is we co-create what our goals are together. He's like, I need to save this much. Our margin needs to stay here. And I say, well, I need this. We find something in the middle.
I think that's the biggest difference now. I think CMOs realize the only way to stay in that job longer than 2 years, if you don't develop that relationship with that CFO, you're dead.
Adversarial doesn't work for anyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about AI. We'll come back to it. When you think about American Eagle, you guys pump out a ton of content, right? What, 500?
I think 500 pieces of content a week. I mean,
which is crazy, just for your social channels. And it's growing, right?
Yep.
That's new. While generative AI is basically pitched as an efficiency play, how do you make sure that you're not losing the authenticity that you need, especially with the target audience of this younger generation, who I feel like it's cool to hate AI now, right?
Yeah.
And you've leaned into that.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure of that when you are pumping out so much and you need to continue that pace?
I think the biggest difference, Suzanne, is below the line versus above the line. I don't have some pledge that I'm here to make, but above the line, we rarely use AI in creative, except in very overt and very humorous instances. For example, we put jean shorts on the Statue of Liberty and got a big laugh. But I will say, below the line, as a CMO, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because the ability of my team to concept something like this and then be able to go shoot or brief a creator, whatever it is unbelievable. I told Suzanne earlier, we're working with a new soccer guy named Lamine Yamal, who is maybe the face of the World Cup right now. He is a Spanish kid, and we had some Spanish-English, language barriers. In real time, my team was sitting there changing the potential, video asset creation. He was like, more of this and less of that. And I was like, wow, I have never actually experienced that before. We were co-creating in real time using AI. Now, of course, we go out and shoot the real thing, and everything the customer sees is real life. But the ability to concept with AI, wow, it's very exciting.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I'm just going to pick at that 1 second. Then we're going to ask you about the same question. But this is the new sort of default line that I've been hearing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this idea, no, and I think it's just because we're in a learning environment, right? So right now it's all, I'm using it for the digital.
Yeah.
Right? And you're really blown away by what it can do.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 marketers are like, but not for the high touch stuff, not for the long form stuff. When?
When? Yeah.
Like, because you're seeing that stuff is coming, as long as you do the work beforehand, like build the libraries, feed the LLMs, your brand cases, and then you'll make it smarter. How far are we?
I guess the customer will ultimately lead us there, right? Because I think that our customer base would storm the barricade if we were using AI too aggressively. But I guess to your point, I have to keep an open mind of when will this happen, and what is it? The backgrounds? Is it the music? Is it the crowds? I don't know. But I think right now, that is a no-win situation. My audience would absolutely, unless it is very overt and we're putting jorts on the Statue of Liberty, not be happy with us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for us, we're actually using across the entire funnel and across the entire mix. Yeah. So Mercedes-Benz globally actually released an entirely generative AI ad last year for the new CLA. So that was an experiment for sure. Yeah. So we could at least test and learn and understand how people reacted to it. It didn't test as well. Okay. There's just such skepticism, right? Especially, I have a 12-year-old who refuses to use AI because he's like, it's coming for my job in the future, so I'm not doing it.
At 12.
At 12. Yeah.
Wow.
He's a little intense.
I think somebody needs to hire him right now.
But I mean, that skepticism, that cynicism about it already with the younger generations, we've got to be really careful about that. And the other thing I'll say is that as a luxury brand, Mercedes-Benz is selling a car to you that you should not be paying that price for, but you're going to anyway because it's a psychological thing, right? Yeah. That requires a really human touch, interaction, right, and creative that's really special for them. Yeah. So we have to be, I think, especially careful about that. I think for your customer, you do, and just as a luxury brand, we really do too. So
I think we would have been there if not for the fact that the consumer revolt was so fast and furious.
It really was.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think because there are some companies that have already produced some stuff. But if you do it the right way and feed the LLMs, and that takes a year, 2 years to make them good. Because you can't be like, give me this if you didn't feed your library in.
Right.
And I think if you look at those, the people that have done it right, they're probably decent enough. But I think the environment's just not ready now. So I think the tech probably could be ready before people will be, almost.
I think we just run into issues when people treat generative AI as the strategy. Instead of having a strategy in which Gen AI is in service to it, right? And I think people get very carried away by the tool. And I have my CIO partner, Daniela, likes to say a fool with a tool is still a fool. Right? And so I think that's like...
tool is still a fool.
Yeah, which is like really interesting, to think about it that way, right? It's
a
really good reminder.
It is. Well, we'll see what happens in a couple of, but it's getting, now that we're seeing some of the stuff come out, it's mind-blowing what it can do. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about when you're reaching your luxury buyers who are skewing younger and younger, how do you do that nowadays, right? Because you have a market where you've got to make sure that this is still aspiration for the younger set, but keeping the boomers happy, who are your sort of core. How are you approaching that from a creative lens?
Creatively.
Yeah.
So different sets of creative for different things and different generations, of course, and then using different channels, right, where they're sitting, right? We know the difference between a Facebook and a TikTok or a Snap, right? So just having the right piece of creative and the right channel for that audience, we're very, very judicious and disciplined about the way that we work out that strategy.
Okay.
So I think when you talked earlier, Suzanne, about how much AI is aiding in media planning,
Yes.
I think we're especially careful. We definitely use the tools at our disposal, but again, this luxury marketing is an art and a science, and you need both, right, to
Yeah.
make sure that you're getting it right. But I'll talk about a very specific example for you. A lot of people have asked me why we chose to sign up for The Devil Wears Prada 2.
Yeah.
If anybody has seen that movie, I would like to argue that Mercedes-Benz has one of the best placements in that movie. It was so authentic that Miranda Priestley would drive a Maybach S-Class. There was no question about it, right?
Yeah.
And the worst thing about placements is when you're watching a movie
Oh, yeah,
and it's jarring and you're like, she would never drink that and she would never put that on her face, right?
Yeah.
But in our case, we had a look at the script several years ago and were able to actually figure out what car should go where.
Yeah.
This car had not even debuted when we shot it.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a brand new car that we had
Yeah.
coincide with the launch or whatever. But Devil Wears Prada is a great example of catching a generation
Yeah.
that may not have seen the original or saw it later,
Yeah.
but are now coming up, right, with it and maybe moving into that bracket to buy.
Yeah.
Right? And so being part of that
And you get the
moment.
and you get the moms and the dads.
That's what I'm saying. You
'Cause
get the
that's their-
multi-generational
yes.
appeal, right? The mom taking the daughter, and I saw them at the premiere, together, in a way that feels very true to Mercedes, to Maybach, and to the movie,
Yeah.
and puts you in the moment, the pop culture moment. That's
We'll come back to that
Good one.
cultural moment in a way.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about back to school,
Yeah.
right? Because it's literally and then we're right into holiday.
Yeah.
What's your primary marketing playbook look like as we're coming up?
I'm not giving you all the secrets
Come
yet,
on.
but I think this year's going to be interesting because this year's going to be different.
How?
And well, we had a monocultural event last year, right? And I think that the insight that we're seeing right now is there are so many different things shaping youth culture at one time: sports, street, streaming, shows, whatever it is. And I think that the monoculture event that we had last year was a moment in time, and I think this year will be a bunch of different things in a blitz because there is very small attention right now out
Yeah.
there. And the interesting thing about my industry, and I joke, but it really is true, the Super Bowl of denim happens over 3 weeks. That's it. And it's make or break for my year, just as much as Black Friday. So last week of July to the first 2 weeks of August, that is the moment
Yeah.
that you have to show up. And it builds nicely into that, and we're in that build mode now. But I think it's going to be this kind of rapid fire, hold on, and let's get going, and get people talking.
How much sleep are you getting given the comps from last year?
Oh, dude. I don't know about the traffic comps. I don't think are possible. I don't think that's going to be possible. But conversion comps can be.
Yeah.
And so, listen, we've been thinking about this since the moment of last year. I think we were built for this. And here we go. Here goes nothing.
And you survived, so that's
Yeah,
more
right?
than I thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
You're good. You talked about sports. I want to talk a little bit about, you've really shaken up what Mercedes sort of associates with on the sports side quite a bit, right? Like when I was growing up, Mercedes was at the Open and tennis, and now I'm watching the Knicks, everybody go Knicks. You guys were all over the NBA. Talk about how you've expanded your presence in sports and why that's happening. Not shocking, but I want to talk a little bit, both of you, about, I feel like now, yes, like it's all sports or nothing. And it's such a cluttered environment. So talk a little bit about why we moved in such aggressively, and then how do you find ways to stand out? Because it has become wallpaper unless you have something unique to say. There's so many brands being flooded into each of these sporting events.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about our Amazon deal, right,
Yeah.
to get into the NBA for
Yep.
the first time. The audience is there, first of all. It's affluent, it's urban, right? We were also able to do it in an interesting way. We weren't just, on the wall of a arena or just an ad break. We were able to create a content series with Dirk Nowitzki, obviously the famous German Dallas Mavericks player. and featuring the GLC SUV, right? And that was a really interesting way to break out. It performed really well for us. Sports will continue to be really important for us. We remain a champion sponsor or partner of the Masters tournament. This will be our 20th year in 2027.
Yeah.
That is a property with deep equity for us and exactly where we need to, as I mentioned earlier, conquest customers from BMW, Audi, Lexus. And we did, I think you are aware, just signed a huge deal with the Women's Tennis Association. So we remain in tennis, just in a different format, and I think in an area of even more excitement and growth.
Yeah. And for you, obviously picking, you have this kid who's just a phenom.
And I think that the insight is people first. I think our customers really identify with human stories, and that can be Lamine Yamal or Coco Gauff, which is
We share her then.
There we go.
All right.
Let's go. But I think one of the best performing and honestly most efficient things is NIL. And for us, it's niche female sports. There is something about the entrepreneurial hustle of a young female athlete that our audience really loves. She's a student, she's an athlete, she may be making community impact, she has a sense of style, and I think that has been a big win for us.
I have one more question for you, and then I'll give you both one to end. But you did an activation with Ella Langley at Stagecoach, right? It was huge, but it felt like a creative pivot for you guys, right? Obviously, country music and Gen Z is off the chart. But I wanted to ask you, how does, you're a legacy mall brand that was very coastal, right? And here you've now leaned into this in heartland and country. How did you do that without alienating your sort of base?
But again, this was data first. So Spotify kindly identified the fact that country music is the fastest growing music genre for Gen Z and now the #1 most listened to genre for my customer base. And it isn't just the heartland, it's everywhere and increasingly global as well. Sometimes you get lucky, and this was one that we got lucky because we signed Ella roughly October, November of last year, shot the campaign in December, and launched the campaign when her song Choosing Texas went #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it stayed for a record 10 weeks and continues to dominate. She's been such a pleasure to work with. And country makes sense, right? Denim on denim and that whole vibe. And I also think, just one final plug for country music, is people are looking for authentic stories. And I think that is a genre that tells authentic stories.
Okay, final question.
Uh-oh.
She's rubbing her hands.
Suzanne is known for the gotcha final question. So I've been sweating this all night.
No. All right, one word that will explain what's going to happen next year. One word. Wow.
You go first.
I'll let you have 2 words. Celebration, shit show, roller coaster. Come on.
I think
surprises.
I think for me, and this is more than one word, but control the uncontrollables. It's actually been such a fascinating journey as a CMO, because I've gone into years thinking, we got this. This is going to be smooth sailing. I actually thought 2026 was that. And that has turned out to be obviously a little bit different. So I think control the uncontrollables, scenario plan out different ways in. I think that has been an interesting challenge. And here we go with the election cycle again, all the stuff. So
36 words, but okay.
Yeah.
I'll answer the brief. The exhilarating unknown.
Whoa. Okay.
I'm excited about it.
All right, I'd hire her.